Good morning! Today I am making the first block in my new Stitch-Along project. We will be making Wonderfil's Bird Watcher Block of the Month for 2024. This wool applique project is designed for hand stitching, but in my videos I'll be demonstrating how you can do the sewing by machine. I purchased the wool kit that has all the appliques pre-cut and the fabric for the block backgrounds. For full disclosure, Wonderfil gave me a discount on the cost, but they aren't sponsoring this video. I'm anxious to get started, so gather your wool, your threads, and your tea, and let's go. Let's start by taking a look at the threads we'll need over the different blocks in this project. Wonderfil offers a thread bundle to make this project using hand stitching, which is really good, but we wouldn't be able to use all of the 8-weight threads the bundle includes. With that in mind, I put together a thread list linked below and also on my blog site, so you can buy the threads you need individually. The 12-weight wool acrylic threads you see here are the ones that Wonderfil chose for the project that exactly match the wool fabrics in the kit. This weight of Alana threads works fine in my machine. I've added a nice set of colorful spaghetti 12-weight cotton solid colors. I have larger spools than you need for the project because they are the ones I use frequently. I find these threads work extremely well in my machine. I also have a handful of really pretty 12-weight colorful variegated fruity cotton threads. On these, you don't need to follow my colors exactly. You can have fun picking your own. We'll use the spaghetti and fruity threads to replace some of the 8-weight pearl cotton balls that Wonderfil uses for decorative hand stitching in their project. For other places, you can see I have a few balls of the 8-weight cottons that we can couch down. The 100-weight Invisifil is something I use on a lot of my projects. It's a cottonized polyester that can take the place of a monopoly, which I find doesn't work well in wool applique. Finally, I have a cone of 80-weight Deco Bob for the bobbin in a color that more or less matches the background. One cone this size should do for the whole quilt. Here I have the wool pieces for the first block. I'm used to trying to build applique projects from scratch, so having these pieces pre-cut for me is a real luxury. Refer to the kit instructions and place the pieces like they show. I found it was easy enough to place them just by eye. Just be sure to center the overall design in the middle of the block. The nice thing about wool felt is it will kind of stay in place and it does not fray. I steam press the block with all the pieces in place to get it all nice and flat. Then I lightly glued the pieces in place using this great Select glue stick. Just glue a little in the middle to keep them in place. Leave the edges unglued or you have to cross over other pieces. I like to iron the pieces after they are glued to hold them in place. As thick as the wool is, you still need a stabilizer for machine stitching, especially when you're using decorative stitches. So I am using 2 layers of Ultra Clean and Tear by OESD. I have used it frequently and know it tears nicely away after it is stitched. So here we have block 1 ready to take to the machine. The instructions say to start by appliquing all the pieces of the canary onto the background piece of the blue wool, with corresponding Alana thread colors. So we can do exactly that using the machine and a blanket stitch. Just be mindful of the layering so we get the back pieces stitched down first. Most machines have a blanket stitch that can be easily adjusted for width and length. My machine has several versions, but I am using the basic single blanket stitch, with the default width and length. I did lower the tension to 1.75. I'm starting with the brown thread to stitch down the branch the bird stands on. You can see that the matching thread practically disappears with the wool colors. The nice things about the soft wool thread is that it cuts easily, so I can use the automatic cutter on my machine when we get to the end. Now I need the green thread that matches the leaf. Its number is EN13. The yellow is EN31 cream butter. I'm going to lift the wing a bit. That's one of the reasons I didn't glue it down along the edges, so I could lift the pieces when I needed to. Now I'll lift the tail piece a bit so I can make sure the whole outline of the body gets stitched down. Wool fabric can stretch fairly easily, especially when it is as humid as it is today, so I find I need a tailor's stiletto or something similar to keep some of the applique edges feeding properly. Or here is one of my stitch rippers. It can act as a stiletto if you can't find your stiletto. Now it stops just right when I push a button and turn a corner. I'll continue the same way with all the pieces. Next up, we have the mango for stitching down the wing and the tail. First, I'm going to change to a new needle. It was beginning to split thread a bit. I am using 116 top stitch needles, by the way. Start stitching down the tail piece, including under the wing. When I go this slowly, it's almost like stitching by hand, one stitch at a time. Now we just have the wing left. I'll get the glue first and glue down the edges of the wing a bit to make it easier. I think that will help a lot. I think these bent tweezers may be the best tool for getting it to behave as I stitch it down because of the curvy edges of the wool. I got a thread break at first because I forgot to lower the top tension. Now for the black to stitch down the bird's eye. Now we have all the appliques done, and we're ready to do the decorative stitching, which I think is the most fun. We worked out a lot of these in the stitch library I made in the last video, and I'll link that here. One we didn't try at first is a beak, which is filled in with stitching. But I made another test since the last video and found something that should work. This is stitch number 406, which I enlarged to 120% at 14.6 length. So if you have a similar stitch, enlarge it and tell your machine to only make one. Look at the pattern and see where the beak goes and mark it with an air erasable marker. I'm going to measure it. Lower the top tension to 1.5 and the presser foot pressure to 30. I'm still using an open-toed embroidery foot number 20D, and I'll use the mango wool thread EN46 that matches the wing and the tail. Look at that! That looks great! So I had a camera problem just as I was recording the chain stitching around the wing and the body, but I was able to recreate it here from my own fabric stash to demonstrate. Then we'll go back to working on the actual piece, which came out really well. The instructions tell you to chain stitch around the body using one of the 8-weight pearl cottons, but we can't chain stitch with something that heavy. Instead, I'll use a fruity variegated 12-weight cotton that looks about right. The chain stitch we worked out in the stitch library was number 38 at 1.7 width. Remember to lower the top tension to 1.5. I'll stick with the 20D foot. I'm using a very slow speed for the chain stitching because I want it to look like it was stitched by hand and you need some time to maneuver. You can speed up a little after you get it started. This is looking nice. I use the same settings for chain stitching around the wing and the tail. Now, for hand stitching, Wonderfil suggests a stem stitch to outline the leaf, but I think a chain stitch will work better here by machine. So I'm going to keep the same stitch settings, but use a green variegated fruity 12-weight thread just for the outline. You can usually tell where the design is starting and ending by listening to your machine, so you know where to stop and turn it. My machine also has a screen button that I can use to make it begin the design where needed. And at the end, I cross over the beginning by one stitch. At this point, you can see all the chain stitches come out really well. For the stem of the leaf, I'm going to couch down this variegated green 8-weight pearl cotton. It's one of the 8 weights that Wonderfil recommends, and it's worth couching here to get the right look for the plant. Here I'm using the 39C foot, which has a small hole down the middle to carry a light cord for couching. I thread the pearl cotton in that hole using the same trick with a tooth flosser I normally use for threading heavy-weight threads in a needle. I have my machine threaded with a 12-weight cotton green fruity thread in the needle. To couch down the pearl cotton, we'll be using a narrow zigzag stitch with the 12-weight thread over top of the 8-weight. Do this slowly. You're probably tired of hearing me say stitch slowly, but for this project it really matters. Just think about how you're replacing hand stitching, which is even slower still. Once you get this sewn, you can use a sashiko needle to pull the ends of the pearl cotton to the back. That's the only hand stitching we will do on this block. Now to finish the leaf, I'm going back to the 20D foot and using the 12-weight green fruity with a triple stitch pattern, which is number 6 on my machine. I lowered the stitch length to 3.5 and the top tension to 1.5. To get this right, I'm cutting and restarting for every V-shaped vein in the leaf. I am also using the edge of the foot to help me gauge an even amount between each of the leaf veins. For the decorative stitching on the bird's body, I've changed back to the same 12-weight thread we used for the chain stitch around the wing and the tail. We worked at a very similar design to the pattern Wonderful recommends you stitch on the bird's belly in the Stitch Library video, stitch number 137. Again, the top tension should be 1.5, but I'm going to keep the default width and length. I like to mark where I'm going to stitch using an air erasable marker. You can look at their pattern and then just mark a similar line by eye. Then stitch down the middle of the foot following the line. For stitching on the wing, I'm using an off-white 12-weight spaghetti cotton. I'm going to use stitch number 1333, which looks like a combination of fly stitches, and just do one repeat of the design at a time. It's a little different from what Wonderful used, but I think it makes a great fill on the top of the wing. It makes you think of feathers. Now I'll do the lines on the wing along with the French knot stitch we worked out on the Stitch Library. First I mark the lines with my air erasable marker. Then I stitch all the lines. I'll use the number 6 triple stitch again for the straight stitches, which I'm using in place of hand back stitching. The French knot we worked out is kind of an asterisk looking stitch that can be resized, but both the length and the width should be the same. I narrowed it to 3.5 width and 3.5 length and told the machine to do only one repeat at a time. I stitched one of these at the end of each of the lines. Now we have a log or branch to deal with. Here we want to kind of simulate a running stitch. I did some practice runs with stitch 1328 on my machine, and I think I want to try that again here. The idea is to use 100 weight Invisafill in the same color as the fabric on the top and fill the bobbin with 12 weight spaghetti. What we want is to pull up the bobbin thread to the top by using a fairly high top tension so it looks like a hand-stitched running stitch. Stitch 2 lines on the log. I think it's going to have a bit of a hard time here because the brown wool is a little thicker than the others, but we'll still get a nice pattern with it, so I'm going to go with it. I'm going to draw a little patch of slightly irregular lines on the head to fill with simulated running stitches, keeping the same color 12 weight spaghetti in the bobbin, but stitching with a yellow Invisafill on top to match the bird. Be a little patient using this stitch with these threads. It may break a bit because the Invisafill is very light and you need a heavy top tension to pull the spaghetti up from the bobbin. You need to stitch slowly anyway to place the individual stitches properly around the applique, as if you were hand stitching. Wonderfill suggested 2 hand-stitched red circles, but I think this would be a great place to add a couple of red buttons. I've got some red buttons here, and I've threaded my machine with a red 40 weight polyester on top. I'm using the button foot, which is a foot number 18 on my machine. Use whatever system your machine has for sewing on buttons. On mine, it is stitch number 60. I'm going to lower the top tension a bit. You need to make sure the button is in the right place, and you may need to use a little glue to hold it on while you are getting it stitched down. Check to make sure the needle is going to stitch in the right holes. I still like to stitch it twice. I think this button will work. It's not too big or too shiny. Now we need to finish off by stitching the feet. Looking at the pattern picture, I thought the thread looked too light, so I picked a darker tan. I marked where the lines will go with an erasable marker. Then I traced the lines with the triple stitch I've used a couple of times on this project. I'm still using 12 weight wool acrylic thread with a 20C foot. However, I lengthened the stitch to about a 4 length and set the top tension even lower than I have before, to 1.25. Now with that, this block is finished. I hope you enjoyed the first block in this fun wool applique quilt. We'll catch up soon with Wonderfill's schedule for releasing new blocks, and then I'll post about making each block after it is released. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them below, and I'll try and answer them quickly to help you keep on track. And of course, until next time, have fun in your studios and keep on stitching!